First off, I want to show you some of the items that you will be needing if you are going to use or implement the Networx trilogy and Architect lock series. The main thing is the programming device. Now, this device is called a gateway. This device will connect to your network or an off-network, if you want to call it that. A standalone network that has no outside traffic, such as the internet coming to it. That way, it's contained, and you won't have any outside traffic coming in. But this device connects, like I said, to your network. You can use either what we call an IME gateway, which is the one you see on the screen. The IME requires power from an outside source, which you get a transformer and about 8 feet of cable to connect it to an outlet. It also requires an Ethernet connection. So you're going to have some type of Ethernet connection from the network to this device. We also have a PoE gateway, which is a power over Ethernet. It does not require outside power. It gets its power from the network. So if you're going to use those, then you have to make sure that your network is PoE capable, or you have a power injector, or some kind of device connected to your network that will allow power to go through the Ethernet cable. Then we also have an 802.11 gateway, which is a Wi-Fi gateway. It is once it's properly set up, then it would connect to the network over the Wi-Fi. Now, to use the Wi-Fi gateways, you would first have to plug it into an Ethernet cable and power, and then you would set it up. I'll show you how to set the parameters for the gateways when we get to the software. So you'd have to set up your parameters, your SSID name, which is your network name, your network password, and so forth. And then once it's all set up, then you can unplug the Ethernet cable, go hang it wherever you need to hang it, plug it in for power, and it will show up on your network. So we'll talk about those, and I'll show you how to set all of the gateways up. Now, the other type of gateway that we have is a USB gateway. Now, this little gateway is for plugging into a laptop and then walking within range of the locks and being able to program them. One of the limitations on a USB gateway is you do not have global lockdown. Okay. So with the standard gateways, the IME, the PoE, and the Wi-Fi gateways, you have a global lockdown, meaning you can lock down up to 2,000 locks in under 10 seconds in case of an emergency. The USB gateway can be used as in the beginning as a temporary programming device. So if you have the locks installed, but the gateways are not yet up and running, but you want the locks to be able to be used with the credentials, whether it's a card or a PIN or whatever it is, then you can use the USB gateway to temporarily program the locks. And then you can move those locks over to the corresponding gateways at a later time. And I'll show you how to do that as well. Now, with the standard gateways, the IME, the PoE, and the Wi-Fi, we do have an expander with the second generation gateway. So this expander will extend the range of your communication, which on average is about 120 to 150 feet in standard building construction. Now, if you add an expander to the gateway, it's going to get you another about 120 to 150 feet. So it's kind of like, if you're familiar with it, it's a hop. Okay, so it would hop from the gateway to the expander and then to the lock. Now we can have up to 7 expanders per gateway. They can be in a daisy chain, or they can be in any kind of pattern that is necessary for you to be able to communicate with the locks. So this is a picture of the IME gateway, the electronics board. So you can see the Ethernet input here. So you would plug in your Ethernet cable into this port. This is for your power. The two little plugs here are for your power cable. You have a little white button here above the two dials. That white button is your reset button. So you can do two different types of resets. You can do a soft reset or you can do a hard reset. So a hard reset will set it back to factory default. That will wipe everything out of it, all of the locks that are assigned to it, all of your parameters, your static IP address, and everything that you've set is going to be wiped out, and it's going to be set back to factory default. A soft reset will just wipe out the locks. Okay, it will keep the IP address and all the parameters. So there's two different types of resets. So read the manual, and you can, it'll show you how to do that. Now the two dials. These two dials are for your expanders. So what this is this is an expander group setting. Okay, so you set the gateway to whatever numbers you want. They all come set as 00. I'll show you a closer picture of it in a minute. But you change those dials to whatever number you want on the gateway and the corresponding expanders. And this will set up your gateway/expander group. The gateway and the expanders in that group will only communicate with each other. Each gateway needs to be on its own setting. Okay, you set this up prior to power up and discovery. Okay, we'll go into that in a little bit. Now, on the newer gateways that we have, you will see also a little plug. This one happens to have the two white wires attached to it, but you'll see a little plug-in. So this pigtail allows you to do a global lockdown. Okay, so we'll talk more about that in a little bit, but that will allow you to do that. Now, the expander, you see it does not have the Ethernet input. We don't need that because it's communicating with the radio that we use, and we do use a radio in the gateway talking to the locks. So the radio communicates from the gateway to the expander, so we don't need the Ethernet input. You have your power input, you have your reset button, and then you have your dials here. So those dials, like I said, that is for setting up your group. So you would change both of these numbers to something different. It can be 0, 1, it can be 11, 22, whatever you want to make it, but make sure it's the same between the gateway and up to 7 expanders for that group. Now, again, you would have to do this before power up, okay, on both units or all the units. So you're going to set this dial up before you power it up. You cannot change the setting once it's powered up and discovered. Okay, so if you already have expanders out there, if you already have gateways out there and you want to add an expander to it, you cannot change that group setting while it's powered up. So you would need to take power off, default the gateway, and then change the setting, and then power it back up, rediscover it, and then add the locks back to it. So you can see it's an extensive process. You got to start all over again. Okay, so do this even if you're not going to use expanders now. Go ahead and change that setting prior to setting up the group setting, prior to setting up the gateways. That way, when it comes down the road, you want to use an expander, all you have to do is change the dial setting on the expander to match your gateway, and then it will automatically find, or it won't automatically find it, but it will allow you to discover it. Okay. Now, as far as the locks themselves, we do have several different types of locks. We have a net panel. So this panel is used for electrified hardware. You use it for your electrified panic devices, electrified lock sets, electric strikes, mag locks, whatever type of electrified device. It does have 2 relays in it, so you can use it for 2 different locks on one panel. Now the locks, the doors or the locks have to be within a 200-foot wire run of the panel. That's our maximum wire run, is 200 feet. So you could use it for 2 different doors. You could use it for one door and say an automatic door opener. So when you swipe your card or enter your PIN, it will activate the relay to unlock the lock, but the secondary relay will actually activate the automatic door opener. Okay, so you can use it for that. The Architect series, it has a little different look than our standard normal Trilogy locks. So our normal Trilogy locks would look like the keypads that we have with the net panel. It'll have the keypad, it can have the prox reader if you want to use that, but you can see with the Architect lock, it doesn't have a keypad yet. We're working on a keypad and prox reader unit that you can use, but at the current time, it's a prox only. The Architects are for interior use. The electronics are not weatherized, so you can't put it on an exterior gate, and it's only mortise and cylindrical locks. There's no narrow style, there's no panic bar version, none of that. It's just mortise and cylindrical locks. So you could use these on the interior offices, the classrooms, anything interior. It'll save you quite a bit of money over the Trilogy Networx. So compare the prices, and you can see your cost savings. So basically, what it is, it's an electrified lock set. That's a Marks USA electrified lock set, and it's Alarm Lock electronics and reader. So we've combined the two and given you that capability. Now, on the back to the Trilogy side, we do have that exit trim version. Okay, so we do have for the panic bars, we have both the prox and keypad, the prox only and the keypad only. So we have all those versions, and you can see that the battery box and the electronics box above the exit bar here is quite a bit bigger than our normal exit trim. That's because our mortise, the Trilogy mortise, cylindrical, and exit trim use 4 C-cell batteries instead of the AA's, and we get approximately a 5-year battery life out of those. But that also houses the antenna, the electronics, some of the electronics. So, I mean, it's a little bit bigger case, but it does have a longer battery life. We do have the Trilogy storefront or aluminum narrow style doors that have the radio in them and also have the remote release capability built into it. If you're familiar with our standard 1200 and 1300 locks, we cannot add a wireless remote release to those, but we can with the Networx version. So you can see the difference here. We have the little black cap at the top that houses the radio antenna for the programming and for the remote release. Now, you can use all of these locks standalone if you want to. So if you have a storefront lock and you want that remote release capability without having to add an electric strike and an aftermarket remote release, you can use this lock, this 1300, or any of the Networx locks as a standalone unit. You can do all the programming at the keypad. You can use the USB gateway to program this lock. That way you have access to the event log. So there's several different ways you can utilize the locks. Now, so on back to the Architect, we do have the cylindrical version. You can see that it has a little bit different look. It's a cylindrical with the prox reader. You notice that it has a little white dot here on the edge of the door. That's for a door position switch. So the Architects come standard with a door position switch. So you can monitor whether that door is held propped open or forced open. Now, it's a local alarm. It won't report back to the software. but you can make it beep, and it will record on the event log that it was propped open or forced open. Now we have a special Architect Series lock, which is an N90L. This is a lockdown version. It has the strobe on it. Of course, all of the Architect locks go into lockdown, but this one has a bright red strobe on the electronics box. So you can see the electronics box on the back. It's 4 AA batteries. And when you go into a lockdown, there's a little button here, a little opaque button that will flash red. I have my version on the desk. I'll show you what that looks like when we get to the software. Okay. Now, each gateway, each expander, each lock will come with its own ID card. Okay, it's very important that you keep these cards, either a picture of the card, a scan of the card, something where you can actually have this information. Excuse me, because when you go to discover these gateways, expanders, and locks, all the software is going to see is the model number and either the MAC address or the serial number, depending on if it's a lock or a gateway or expander. So this information is all that you will see. You won't know where it's located. So we give you the card, and the installer can write where they installed that particular device. This one's first floor, northwest hallway by the janitor's closet. That way you know where to go to and how to rename that device when you discover it in the software. So there's the lock ID card. Again, has a serial number. Each lock has a unique serial number. It also has the place for you to show where that device was installed. Okay. Now, when you're setting up your system, there's a couple of devices that you would probably need to use, and that's a network signal generator and a network signal meter. These are your site survey tools. So this is about the only way that you're going to be able to tell how many locks you can get on a single gateway. Each gateway can have up to 63 locks assigned to it within range. Adding an expander or 7 expanders does not increase the number of locks. It just increases the number, the range. Okay, so these devices come in handy. The generator will send out a signal, so you might hang that where the gateway is going to be. Then you take your meter and you walk to the door. You check the signal strength, and you make sure that it is in the proper signal strength range. Signal strength range needs to be above 32. Okay, 32 is the minimum that you really want to have for your signal strength. If you can notice down here at the bottom of the meter, it has your signal strength level here. So it starts at 20. About 32, it starts turning yellow. Anything in that red is going to be a very low signal, and you could have drop off from time to time. So you don't want drop off. So 32 or higher is an optimal signal strength. Now, our network system has several emergency commands. Okay, so we can do these commands. This is a global emergency command. So you can do these commands from either the software, the keypad, a key fob, or from the gateway now. So from the software, I'll show you that. But from the keypad, we can go into lockdown by presenting a credential and then entering 911 at the keypad. Now, there's a couple of things that you need to be aware of when you're using these emergency commands. Passage, credential, 000, and then return to normal, credential and 123. You must be an authorized emergency user to be able to do this. And you also must have the ability to unlock that door at that specific time. I'll talk more about this when we get into the software in just a minute. But Not just everyone can go to a lock and present a credential and hit 911 and go into lockdown. So you must be an authorized emergency user. We'll talk about that. Now, from the key fob, the 4-button fob, if I hold down the number 3 and 4 at the same time, and I'm within range of one of the 4 locks that I can have paired to that remote, then I can put the entire system into lockdown. So I hold down the number 3 and 4. I'll demonstrate this in a few minutes, but you hold down the number 3 and 4 for about 3 to 4 seconds, and then the system will go into lockdown. I can hold down the 1 and 2 at the same time, and I can return to normal. Okay, so I cannot do passage mode with the fob, but at least you can do lockdown and return to normal. Now, again, the 4th way is with this new plug that's on the gateway. It's a little plug in the pigtail, wired, run the 2 wires down to a momentary switch. Now, I only need to keep this switch closed for at least 1 second, okay? But you take those 2 pigtails with, or the 2 leads off the pigtail, run it down to a momentary button, and then, then you hold that button down for at least 1 second, and it will send the system into lockdown, the entire system up to 2,000 locks, okay? Now, the last thing before we get into the software is I want you to be aware that we do have upgrade kits available for the standard Trilogy T3 and T2 locks. Now, this is an upgrade for cylindrical or mortise, okay? So I can take a standard cylindrical or mortise lock and upgrade it to a Networx lock. The kit includes a new outside housing, which has the keypad and the prox reader and all on it, a new inside housing, which has the radio. You put that, replace those 2 pieces of that lock on the door, and you've upgraded that lock to a Networx. You can save $415 to $560 off a list price, okay? And that will pay for your first gateway, okay? And we do have these in stock. A lot of the distributors will have these in stock, so check with them and see what your cost will be to upgrade your existing DL 2700, maybe your existing DL 3000 or PDL 3000. You want to upgrade now to the Networx. Okay, so check with your distributor, and they can get you some pricing. Okay, now on to the software. So hopefully you're familiar with the software. I'm not going to go into how to create the accounts and users and profiles and all of that. If you're not familiar with that, I have a session, I think it's next week, on DL Windows, and I will show you how to create an account, users, schedules, and all of that stuff. But for this session, we're going to talk strictly about Networx, because everything you do up to that point, or up to, as far as creating everything in the software, it's all the same, whether it's Networx or a T3. Creating the profile, creating the account, adding the users, the schedules, all of that's the same. So if you're familiar with that part of it, you're a step ahead. Okay. So you take your, when you're creating the profile, the lock profile, you take that yellow card, you make sure you pick the correct lock type. Okay. That's the most important part. And then create it and add everybody just like you would. So you're going to have your global users. You got all your users that you have, all of your lock profiles. You're adding cards. You're adding, all of the information in, assigning groups. You're adding your administrative users. Again, it's all the same. Okay. So you have all of that. Now that you have all this set up, you have to go in and discover your gateways. Okay. So to discover your gateways, you just click on Gateway Config. If you have not or if you're creating everything from new and you have not set the security password, it will warn you when you go to click on gateway config that you have not created a security password. So make sure you create that security password, 6 characters, alphanumeric, no special characters, no hashtags, no ampersigns, nothing like that, just letters and numbers. They can be capital letters, lowercase, doesn't matter. 6 characters. Keep that in a safe place, okay? Because if you ever lose your software and you have not created a backup, then you would have to start all over, because that security password, what it does is it adds an extra layer of security from someone walking into your facility, plugging into your network, and then taking over your gateways. Okay, so if they don't have that security password, they can't talk to the gateways. Doesn't matter if they already have, an account set up and everything. If they don't have that same security password, they cannot communicate with the gateways or the locks. So hang on to that. So you're going to click on Gateway Config. Okay. Now in this case, I already have 2 gateways already assigned in here. I have 11 locks between the 2 gateways. Now, to discover the gateway, there's a couple of ways that you can do it. You can go under Gateways, click on that tab, and click on Discover New Gateways. This is a 2-step process. So once you discover the gateway, then you have to come back and add each gateway individually. Okay? Or you can click on Discover Gateways and Auto Add. This will automatically go out and discover any defaulted, unassigned gateway. It'll find it, discover it, and add it to the account. Okay, it's all in one process. You don't have to do each one individually. It'll do it for you. But I want to show you under the Gateways tab and the Discover New Gateways, there's a couple things I want to show you that might pop up somewhere down the road. So I want you to be aware of it. So I'm going to click on Discover New Gateways, and it's going to go across my network, and it's going to find any available defaulted gateway. Okay, so it's found 2. It found a new gateway which has an IP address, which tells me that it is just a regular gateway connected to the network. And then I have my USB gateway, which does not have an IP address, okay, nor does it have a MAC address. So when I discover these, you notice that the other 2 are blue. The IP address is shaded blue. Okay, so what that means is that gateway has been discovered, added, and it's ready to go program locks. Okay, the green indicates that it has been discovered, not added, and it's available to add to the network. Now, if it was red, then it would mean that it's unreachable. It means that it's been added to the network. It was blue. Now it's unreachable for some reason. I can't communicate with it. There could be several things that could cause that. Somebody could have unplugged the power. Somebody could have unplugged the Ethernet cable. The IP address could have changed because you didn't set it as a static IP address. We prefer a static IP address, not a dynamic IP address. Okay, static means it will never change. Dynamic means that it could change at any time. The network could decide to change that IP address to that device, which would cause it to be unreachable. Okay, so we need a static IP address. So let your IT department know if you're going to be adding 4 gateways into your system that you need 4 static IP addresses. Okay, 1 for each gateway. Again, the expanders don't require an IP address. Okay, so if you're going to have 4 gateways and 7 total expanders, I don't need 11 IP addresses. I just need 4. Okay. So now that I have my gateways available to be added, then I have to highlight that gateway, go back up under gateways, and then click on Add Gateway to Account. Okay, and that will add that gateway to the account. Okay, so now it's changed it to blue. Now, the light sequence on the gateway itself will change. When it's in factory default, you will have a yellow, steady yellow light, and then the green light on it will be flashing rapidly. Once it is discovered and added, the yellow light will be on solid, and then the green light will have a heartbeat about once per second. Okay, so that way you can tell if it's been added or not. So I'll do the same thing with my USB gateway. Go up under and click on Add and click Yes. And now it has added both of those gateways. Now you notice that each gateway has a different channel number, and this is a different radio channel number. Okay, so we separate the radio channels because we do operate on a 900 megahertz radio. So we separate the channels so there's no cross talk, okay, on a single channel. Imagine in your area, in your city, all of your radio stations are on the same channel. You know, you got 5 radio stations and they're all operating on 95.5. You would not be able to understand a single thing that's coming across that radio frequency, okay? Because they're all cross-talking and different words, so you wouldn't be able to understand anything. Same concept here. Okay, the locks would not understand. It would get confused with the different commands from the different signals. Okay, so we separate the channels. You also see that each one has a MAC address. This is the serial number or the device address for that network device. You have firmware. Okay, so each gateway will have firmware. This firmware is upgradable. Okay, so it can be upgraded if we come out with a new firmware. I'll show you where to find that information and how to do that. It also shows you how many locks are assigned to that gateway. So I have 7 assigned to this first gateway, 4 to the second one, and then of course none because we haven't discovered anything on these other 2. It also shows you the expanders. Now you notice that this one says NA, the first one here. That's because this is a first generation gateway. It's a Gen 1, meaning that it did not have the expander capability at that time. So I cannot add an expander to a first generation gateway. I can only add it to the second generation gateways, which number 2 and number 3 here are second generations. It also tells me that the status is ready. So these gateways are ready to go to work. They're ready to go discover locks, program locks, whatever the case is. Okay. I'm going to show you how to add an expander here. So I'm going to add it to this Gen 2, gateway number 2 here. So I would highlight that gateway. I would go under expanders and discover new expanders. Remember that the dials have to be the same. Okay, the setting on the dials for both the gateway and the expander must be the same. So this is going to take a little bit of time, okay, because it's going to go out and it's going to search for the for the expanders. Then it's going to do a field test, if you want to think of it that way, of each expander to another expander. It's going to find the best path that has the best signal strength between the expanders. So if I had 5 expanders, it will go through and it will test each one, and it'll say, okay, well, you've got this signal strength, but if I run you through number 2 through number 1, I can get a good signal. It's going to do all that for you. You don't have to worry about the path. It'll do it for you. Okay. So it found one expander. There's the serial number. There's my signal strength, which is really good. So I highlight the radio button, and I can remove that expander or I can replace it. So if an expander goes bad, I can replace an expander. But it's been discovered and added to that gateway. So if I click on just refresh and then click close, you see now that because of the channel numbers, it's moved my number 2 gateway down because of it tries to keep the order in channel number. But you can see now it's added that expander to that gateway. Really easy, really simple to do. Okay. Now, this new gateway, one of the things that I need to do in here is I need to go in and make sure that I have a static IP address. So I have to set my network parameters. So to do that, I go under Gateways, and then I scroll down to Configure Edit Network Settings. And this will bring up all of my network settings. You notice that the Use DHCP box is not checked. Because I already have this gateway on my network and I've set that as a static IP address, the system realizes that that is a static IP address. So normally it would have the box checked here. If it's checked, then it has not been set up as static. So you need to uncheck that and then set it up as static. When the box is unchecked, I can go in and change any of these parameters that I need to. My IP address, if it's going in a different area, okay? Now, while I'm here, I'm going to stop for just a second, and I'm going to say, we can discover gateways on the same subnet or the same VLAN. Okay, I can discover them the way I just did on the same subnet or VLAN. If it is on a different subnet or VLAN from where the software is located, then I cannot discover it the way I just discovered it. Okay, I have to do one of two things: either discover it on the same VLAN, then go in and change my IP address because it would be on a different subnet, which is the third octet here, this one, this third number here. I would have to change it to the correct IP address. I'd have to make sure the subnet mask is correct. Don't have to worry about the default gateway. That's not, a big deal. Make sure the MAC address is correct. And then I send the information to the gateway, and that will send it and save it in the software. And then I can unplug that gateway and take it to the correct IP address, or the correct VLAN. Or I'm going to close out of here real quick. Or I can go under gateways and I can manually add a gateway. Okay. So what that'll do is that'll bring up, my gateway network settings here, and everything is blank. Okay. I'd have to put in the name. I'd have to uncheck the box so I can set the IP address. I'd set the subnet mask. I put in the MAC address off of that ID card. Okay. And then I save that information, and then I close. And then when I go to plug up that gateway, it'll pop right up into the system. Okay. So a couple ways you can do it over different subnets or VLANs. I like manually adding. Okay. That just makes it a whole lot easier. It's already out there. You know what the IP address is. You know what the MAC address is. It'll find it. Boom. Okay. But going back to the configuration settings here, if this is a wired only gateway, then I choose wired only. If it's an IME or a PoE. If it's a Wi-Fi gateway, then I would change it over to wireless. And then I can set my security protocols. Okay, whatever they are. I have to put in the key is the password, the network name, that's, Joe's Crab Shack, whatever. If it's, if your network randomly changes the radio channel or the channel that the Wi-Fi is on, not radio channel, but the channel the Wi-Fi is on, then you leave it blank here with the channel number, and it will roll with whatever channel the system goes to. Your Wi-Fi gateways will not automatically pop up on the network. Okay, a lot of people get confused about this because we are so used to our phones, our computers, and everything. We walk in, get on a Wi-Fi network, and automatically connects as soon as you put in the password. Well, ours gateways don't do that. I have to set up everything manually in the software. So that's why we give you a Ethernet plug-in for a Wi-Fi gateway. It's because you have to plug into it. You have to set the parameters, and then you send it to the gateway, and that will save it. Then you unplug the Ethernet cable, and it's on the Wi-Fi network. Okay. Another thing you need to realize, there are two Wi-Fi frequencies that we use now. One is a 2.4 gigahertz and one is a 5 gigahertz. Okay. 5 gigahertz has a shorter distance but a stronger strength. The 2.4 gives you a longer distance communication but at a lower signal strength. Okay, so we use 2.4. Okay, that's what we use for our gateways. So you need to make sure that your system, if you're going to use Wi-Fi, can set up that you have both at least a 2.4 or 2.4 and 5. Okay, all right. So my gateways are discovered. They're in here. I'm ready to go. All right, now I need to go out and discover my locks. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how the USB gateway actually works, because a lot of people get confused. They think that there's something special about the USB gateway. As far as the way it discovers and adds to the system, the way it discovers locks and programs locks, it's the same whether it's a USB gateway or a regular gateway. Okay, so I'm going to show you the USB gateway. And then I'm going to show you how you can transfer that lock profile from one gateway to, or from that USB gateway to another. So if you're going to use this as a temporary device to program the locks, then I'll show you how to permanently transfer it over to your full gateway. So I'm going to go click on the gateway here that I want to discover locks. And I'm going to go and discover locks. You choose the number of locks you want to discover. We can go up to 63. Okay. So I've got 3 that are discoverable, and I'm going to click on Discover Locks. So it's going to go out and try to find 3 locks. If I had it set for 5, it would try to find 5. If it only found 3, and then it would keep trying for that 4th and 5th one, and then finally it would just time out, and it would pop up with what it did discover. So I have 3 locks here. I have my an N90, an N95, and a PDL 6100. So I told you those yellow cards, you really need to keep those cards, because I have no idea where these locks are located. If they were all the same lock type, I wouldn't know if it was on the front door, the back door, the side door, or where they were located. Okay. So you need those cards to compare the serial number with that where it's located. Okay, so I'm going to choose the 6100 here, and I'm just going to assign it to this USB gateway. Once a lock is assigned to a gateway, it will not communicate with another gateway. Okay, it will only communicate with the gateway that it's assigned to. Now, I'm going to click Assign. The other 2 I'm going to leave alone for right now, but I'm assigning 1 lock to that USB gateway. So once it configures, it asks me if I would like to link the assigned lock to a profile. Just because I've discovered that lock and I've assigned it to that gateway, I have to tell the software what information goes to that particular lock. So we link the serial number to a profile that we've built over here on the left-hand side of the screen. So I'm going to say yes. So you can see I have 3 profiles available. Right? These are my 3 locks. I have 1 available lock. Why is that 6100? Oh, I know why. Never mind. I'm not going to do that. that 6100 is another lock. I didn't mean for that one to show up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete that serial number. Okay, so this is something that you might want to be able to do, or that you might need to do. You want to move, you don't have a USB gateway, you cannot transfer locks from one regular gateway to another. So if I've accidentally assigned a lock to a gateway that doesn't need to be on that gateway, here's the way you remove that lock without having to default it. Okay, go under locks and then delete lock serial number. See the one that's not linked, my 6100 on my USB gateway, I just check that box and I click delete. It says that the data will be permanently lost. You just click yes. Now what that means is the data for the radio, okay? Not any users that you've assigned to that lock. Those will still work. It just removes anything from the radio so you can rediscover it. So I'm going to go to 4 locks now and I'm going to rediscover. Okay. So it's searching for 4. So I should have 4 locks available. There they are. I meant to choose the PDL 1300NW, not the 6100. Okay. So again, I check the box, click assign. And that's going to assign that lock to that gateway. Okay. So now I need to assign the lock to a profile. I say yes. So I have my 1300NW. I know which one it goes to, but if I were to click, if these were all the same, say all the same lock types, I wouldn't know which one that goes to. So I need that yellow card. I keep going back to that card. You need those cards. But since these are different types of profiles, watch what happens when I click on a profile that is not the same lock type as what type of lock is available. It clears it. So the software knows that I cannot link a profile that is not the same lock type as the lock that's available. Okay. So it goes back to, you've got to make sure that you choose the correct lock type when you're building that lock profile. Okay. So I'll go up, I click on the profile, and then I click on the serial number, and it now adds that lock as linked. And you'll see that it says linked over here, whereas these other two say not linked. Okay. So now that lock is linked to that USB gateway. Now I go in, I program the lock, I do all of that, and the lock is ready to use. Just because I link it does not automatically send the information to the lock. Everything about our software and our network system is on demand. I have to push the information out, and I have to pull the information from the lock itself. So I can push the users, the schedules, the features, the date and time, all of that. I can pull the event log out of the lock. Okay. So say we now have everything up and running. I have my new gateway up and running, and I need to transfer this one lock to this gateway, okay, this other gateway. So what I do is under locks, I go to transfer locks to another gateway, and that only works from the USB gateway to a regular gateway. So here's my lock, check the box, and I tell it which gateway to go to. I'm going to move it to that one and then transfer. Okay, this will move the lock profile or the serial number from one gateway, the USB gateway, to the other gateway. Okay, so I don't have to default it, I don't have to delete it, I don't have to do anything, and it moves it. So the selected locks have been transferred successfully. If you want to view the locks, the lock table, you can. We'll just look at it. So this is the lock table for my new my new gateway. Okay, tells me the profile, serial number, firmware version, status says it's locked, the signal strength, the battery status, which is nice to have, and where it's located, whether it's a gateway or an expander. Okay, so we click close out of that. Okay, so now there's my one lock on my gateway. Now, I want to show you to how I'm going to discover the other two locks that I have. I know I've got three, but I'm only going to assign two of them. But I want to show you what happens when you use an expander. Okay, hopefully it'll work right. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to try to discover three locks. Okay, I know there are three, and I know that I only want to assign two. But you saw a minute ago when I picked three and there were four available, it didn't pick the ones that I wanted. So if there are four available, you need to pick all four, and then you choose out of that list which ones you want. Okay, because it may not pick the one that you actually want to go on that gateway. So I know I have three, so I'm going to choose three, and I'm going to use my IME gateway with my expander. So I'm going to click on discover. So now it's going to take a little bit longer for it to discover the locks, because what it's going to happen is the gateway is going to try to find three. If it finds all three, it's going to keep kind of in the back of its memory there what the signal strength is. Then it's going to go and try to discover the three with the expander, and then it's going to put that in the back of its memory. And then it's going to compare the signal strengths between the expander and the gateway and figure out which is the best path for that particular lock. In this case, you can see that it was discovered, all three of them, it decided that the gateway, direct gateway link from the gateway to the lock itself was the better signal strength than going from the gateway to the expander to the lock. Sometimes it'll be gateway, expander, lock. Sometimes it'll only be gateway. Okay, so let the software and the system work the way, let it do its thing, and then it will give you the best path with the best signal strength. Okay, so I have my other two locks here that I'm going to assign. Then I click on assign, and now it will assign those two locks to that gateway, or to that gateway through the expander, if that's the path that it takes. Okay. Let it finish configuring here. Would you like to link them? Again, I'm going to say yes. I picked the lock. See, these are two different lock types here. I have an N95T4 and an N90L1. So I'm going to pick the T4, and that only gives me that one option. So I'll link the two. And then when it finishes linking it and telling the gateway here, then I link the other two, or the other one. Okay. So that's how you link, discover the locks, and link the lock to a serial number. Okay. So now everything is linked. So I need to go in and I need to program those locks. I haven't programmed those three locks. So I can either program one lock at a time by clicking on the lock profile and going under communication, and then communicate with selected Networx lock, and then telling it what I want to send. I like to do all, because I want to be able to send all the users, the schedules, the features, and the date and time, and receive that event log just to make sure I have good communication. Or I can go under wireless, and that's one lock at a time. I can go under wireless here, and I have a wireless configuration. Okay, these are all of my locks. I have three that have not been programmed yet. So I can either check the boxes and then change, and then send the profile, or I can have multiple configurations here. and I can change the name of those configurations. So I have one that says send profile to the exterior doors. I have one send to all locks. I only have one here to send to the so you set it up how you want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check enable the front storefront door, the mag stripe, and the N90. Those are the three that I haven't programmed. Now, you have to have a function for you to be able to hit start down here. So when I hit the drop down, I have send profile, receive log, or send profile and receive log. So I'm going to say send profile. Now I can right click on that function and change all selected, which I've selected the three, change all selected to send profile. Okay. Now I click start, and it will start programming one lock at a time. It doesn't program all the locks at the same time. It will program one and then go to the next one and then go to the next one. So now it's on to the second lock. The first one is complete. Doesn't take long. So now the date and time is being sent to the second lock. It's done. It's going to the third lock and so forth. Okay. So I have a lock here on my desk, which is the N90L. Okay. So if I go to the N90L, which is this lock here, and I present my card, it opens the door. Okay. And then it locks back. Now we can have that feature changed. I can change the amount of time that the door is unlocked, just like on a T3. Anything under the features I can change. Okay, I can have any of these features set up. Oh, wrong one. N90L, there it is. So I can change the amount of pass time. That's how long the door is open. Okay, here's my door ajar. So if I wanted to read if that door was ajar, I would check the box. If I wanted to use the sounder on door ajar, do that. So if I check the box, then I can change the amount of time that the door is open before it sets off the sounder. Or if I don't want to use the sounder, I just have it put an event on the event log. Okay. Now there's a few special functions for the Architect series locks. There is a button on the back of the lock. I'm going to show you on this one. You can see the opaque button here. That button is what we call a programming and passage button. So right now you notice that the door is locked. If I push the button, now I've put it into passage mode, okay? And it'll stay in passage mode. When I hit the button again, locks the door back, okay? So that's my what I can disable that passage button. So if I disable that and I resend just the features, once it's complete, now I push the button, doesn't do anything, okay? It won't put it in the passage mode. I can push, won't do anything, okay? So I've disabled that feature. If I want that button to be able to be used for passage, I can do that. Now, this 30-second smart pass feature, what that does is that changes my pass time from 3, 10, or 15 seconds. I can go 15 max in my pass time. Under features, I can enable the 30-second smart pass. Now, what that will do is that will change it to a 30-second unlock, okay? And then after 30 seconds, it locks back, unless the door is opened and then closed, okay? So it has to be, the door has to be closed. You're in that 30-second time period. If the door is opened a second time and then closed again, it will automatically go into lock, okay? So that's I forgot something. rather than, um, you know, whatever. So, I forgot something in the apartment or in the unit or whatever. Under the remote, so we have those 4-button remote fobs that I was showing you earlier on the picture. So we have that. So we can decide whether that's going to be a momentary release. I push the button and it unlocks the door for 3, 10, 15, whatever seconds. Then it locks back. Or I can have the remote toggle passage. Okay. So I'm going to say momentary release. If I leave it as none, then I can pair the remote to the receiver in the lock. But once I program the lock a second time and it says none, it'll disable that remote. Okay. So you need to have a feature here chosen. It's best to go ahead and have that feature chosen before you pair the remote to the lock. Okay. So now I'm going to reprogram this lock, just the features, because that's all I'm changing. There's no sense in sending the schedules and the users and all of that. Okay. So now that it's done, I have to use a manager's credential, and this is my manager's credential. I present the credential to the reader. It unlocks, and then I push the button. Okay, push the button on the back. It goes into a program mode. I push and hold the button on the remote. See, the light is red. It goes flashing red. And when it's flashing green, it's paired. Let that finish beeping. Let it stop. And then I push that button and hold. The lock will start beeping and flashing. And now it's finished pairing. I push the remote on the button on the remote, and it unlocks the door. Okay. So now it is paired to that lock. So I can have it either momentary or toggle passage, whichever one you want. Okay. Now under the emergency tab in the features, and all of the Networx locks have an emergency tab. Depending on what type of lock it is, it can have different options here. But in this case, receive emergency. If I want this lock to respond to global emergency commands from the gateway, then I check the box. If I don't want this lock to respond to global emergency commands and just act like a regular lock, I uncheck the box, and it will ignore any emergency commands. Okay. Activate global emergency. Do I want the key fob with the button number 3 and 4, hold it down. Do I want the key fob to initiate global commands through this lock? Yes or no? Yes, keep checked. No, uncheck. Activate local emergency from the key fob. Now what this means is it will ignore the local command to lock down, meaning that this lock will not respond to the fob and go into lockdown, okay, locally, but it will send the command globally. Now, my users, do I want my users to be enabled or disabled during a lockdown? By default, all of the basic users in a lock that are programmed to that lock, in a lockdown, their credential will not open the door. So do you want that or do you not want that? If you don't want them to be disabled during a lockdown, uncheck the box. And now anybody that has a credential to open that door will be able to open that door during a lockdown. Okay. Now, enable sounder. Do you want the lock to beep during a lockdown? It will beep for the first 30 seconds of a lockdown. So if I'm walking down the hall and all of a sudden every lock starts beeping, I know by training that we're in a lockdown and I need to get into a safe place. So you decide how the lock responds to global commands. or how it responds during a lockdown. Okay. Now, different locks have different features. Okay, so a storefront lock, we have the remote. We can decide. We have the emergency commands, but now because this lock has a keypad under Activate Global and Activate Local, we have the keypad in here as well, and not just the key fob. Same thing. Do I want the keypad to initiate global commands? Yes or no? Okay. Now you notice that I don't have the smart function, the smart pass, and all of that I had with the architect. There are certain things that are architect only, and certain things that are trilogy only. Okay. So now that we have all of these locks programmed, okay, I can use my credentials. I can open the doors. If my credential is not valid for a door, so this was who was that? John Wayne. I'm going to add John Wayne to the lock, the N90L, and he's added to the storefront door. So now, because John Wayne here, even though he has a PIN number as well, if the lock only has a prox reader, he only has to present the card. If it has both a PIN and prox, he has to present both, the PIN number and the prox. Okay. Now, you notice that some of these users have other little icons by their name. Now, these little icons are for the keypad global emergency commands. Okay. So what this means is the little red light, like Jane Doe here has, the little red light means that if Jane goes to any of the doors that she has access to, which is only the second floor restroom, she's disabled at all the other doors, but her credential will open the second floor restroom. She can enter her credential 2639, and then because they have the little red light symbol, she can hit 911, and it will issue that global command. Okay, I'm going to add her to the front door as well. Okay. Now she can also go to the lock and enter credential and 000 to put everything into passage mode globally. But she can only go to these two doors now. These other ones she cannot go to and issue those commands. And that's all she can do. She can put it into lockdown or put it into a global passage. Now, if they have both the little red light and this open door with the red arrow, they can initiate lockdown and passage, and they can also return it to normal. So we've split it up at the keypad. You can either not do anything at the keypad. You can just issue the lockdown or passage command, but not the return to normal, or you can do all three. Okay. Now, how do you add these? Well, I'm going to go to John here. I'm going to right click on John's name, and down here toward the bottom of this right click list, it says lockdown user. So if I add John as a lockdown user, I give him the little red light symbol. That way he can initiate lockdown. Right click again, lockdown user, enable as a reset. That gives him the ability to reset back to normal. From a lock that he has access to that has a keypad, okay, have to have those. Now, your administrative users, all of these administrative users have that capability automatically. They can do all three: initiate lockdown, initiate passage, and return to normal from a keypad. Okay. So that's how you add those abilities to those individuals. Now, say I need to put the system into lockdown. Okay, I'm going to go to my camera here. So I have my fob. I hold down the number 3 and 4 at the same time. Takes about 3 to 4 seconds. See how it's going into lock? Now, this light will start flashing, okay? Now, globally, I hear all of my other locks starting to lock, okay? Globally, I'm going into lockdown. Now, you can see on the back here, this is the lockdown strobe, okay? Once every second or two, okay? Sometimes it'll give a double flash, but you have that light on the inside, okay? So you'll notice there's nothing in the software that shows that we are in lockdown. That's because, again, our software is passive. We do not have the ability at this current time to send, when we go into a lockdown, for the software to recognize that automatically. If I want to check, I can go to Gateway Config, okay? And then when it checks the status of each gateway, it'll tell us that we are in emergency lockdown, and it'll pop up the little icon bar at the bottom of the screen. You notice the USB gateway says it's still ready. That's because it doesn't do lockdown, okay? Now, I can reverse this from the software, from the key fob, or from the keypad. I can take it out of lockdown, okay? Now, to do that, if I'm going to do it from the software, I go to emergency, and then I have my 3 options: lockdown, passage, return to normal. Let's just say I want to go into passage. I want to put it now into an emergency passage. I just click emergency passage. You notice it says commands not supported for USB gateways. So it has sent out the signal to all of the locks, okay? So it's going to tell you, it's going to tell you once each gateway has received a confirmation from each lock that it is in emergency passage. If it does not get a confirmation from each lock in a fast enough time, it'll skip that lock, go to the next one, and then start over again, okay? It could do this a couple of times depending on, 1, what your signal strength is to each lock, 2, you know, what the environmental conditions are, okay? So now I have, it shows that we are in emergency passage at all of the gateways. Just because it takes longer than 10 seconds for the status to come back in the software does not mean that the locks are not in that emergency status, okay? It just means that it's taken a little bit longer for the gateway to communicate with each lock to get the status, okay? So imagine all of this, again, going back to the different channel numbers here, imagine all of this information going across from different gateways on the same channel. It would just be gobbledygook and you wouldn't get anything back, okay? And then we can, if we needed to, we could go from the key fob or the keypad and go back to normal. So the 1 and 2, hold it down. And this lock is back to normal. It has sent the information to all of the other locks, and I'm going to scan over here. You can see my net panel over there on the wall. It's still flashing. It's still waiting for that information to come back from the gateway. So it's sending that information out. But again, nothing is automatic here. So if I close out of here and I go to my gateway config, I've still got some that are trying to communicate here. There we go. If I try to get a gateway status from the gateways while they're communicating with the locks, then it's going to possibly throw up an error, okay? So all of my gateways are now back to normal status. So I go to my gateway config and you can see that they're all saying ready now, okay? So now I'm back to normal, right? So that is lockdown and the emergency status. Okay. Don't have anybody that's chatted yet. So um, now there's a few things that we can do with these locks as well. With the new version 5.5.3 and the latest firmware. So if I right click, let's say this is my N90L, okay, the one that I have on the desk. It is in locked mode right now. Switched over here real quick. So it's locked, okay. So if I wanted to unlock that door, I could use the 4-button fob, the remote, or if I wanted to buzz somebody in, I can do it through the software. So if I right click on that lock profile, I have 3 options here. I have take the lock out of passage. So if it's in passage, I can take it out from the software. I can put it into passage mode, meaning a permanent passage mode, or say permanent, you know, a normal passage mode. It's going to stay unlocked until you lock it back. Or I can manually unlock that door. So if I click on manually unlock door, it gives me a few options here. I unlock this door for pastime. Okay. Remember under features that 3, 10, or 15 seconds. So I'm going to buzz somebody in for that 3 seconds. So if I send the command to the lock and then switch over here, you'll see it beep. It's unlocked. 3 seconds later, it locks back. Okay, so I've just buzzed somebody into that door. Okay, so if I go back here to the manually unlock, I can actually hit the drop down and I can have it stay unlocked for these preset times from 2 minutes to 240 minutes. So I'm going to have a timed passage mode now up to 4 hours. Okay, so you just pick the time, send the command. Okay, now for that feature to work, that manually unlock door, I have to have under features and remote, I have to have remote release chosen. If I have toggle, that manually unlock door will not relock the door. Okay, it'll just unlock it and leave it unlocked. Okay, so I have to have remote release momentary for that manually unlocked door to work. Okay. Now, one of the other things that we have here is we can actually check the status of that lock. So if I want to see if that door is locked, what the battery status is, what the firmware version is, you see it says 0, but watch, it'll come back, and because we haven't pulled the status from the lock yet after we programmed it. Haven't pulled the status, so there it's showing my firmware version. It shows that my batteries are good, my lock status is locked, and gives me all the information. So if it showed that my lock batteries were low, then I could go change the batteries. Okay. If I want to check the status of multiple locks on a gateway for their battery status and their locked or unlocked status, then I go under Gateway Config. I'm going to choose this one here because there's 7 locks on it. Go under Locks and View Gateway's Lock Table. Okay. So if I hit refresh to make sure that my time is, see, that was dated June 11th. It's 5 days ago. Now it's June 16th. You can see that I have 1, 2, 3 locks that are in passage mode. These are my signal strengths. So you can see that this lock here is below that 32 that I like. Also shows the battery status, okay, that the batteries are good. So if I need to check the battery status of my locks, and I have, say, 3 gateways, then I can go to each gateway, view the table, and check the battery status. Okay, make sure that the status is up to date. Okay, if not, click refresh, and it makes sure that the date and time are correct for you, and it will pull the status. See how my numbers change? Radio frequency is a wave. Okay, I meant to say this earlier. When we were talking about signal strengths, a radio status, a radio wave, a radio signal is a wave. Okay, so you have high points and low points. Your signal strength, when you get it, it could be at a high point, and if it's a 26 at a high point, it's going to be below 26 longer and more time than it is at that 26. So I do have a chat. If a lock is put into passage by the 000 code, does it have a time limit? No, it does not. It will stay in that. That's considered an emergency mode or an emergency command. All emergency commands are going to stay in that status until it's acted on by another emergency command. Okay, so lockdown, it will stay in lockdown forever until you take it out one of the three ways: software, remote, or keypad. If it's in passage, it'll stay that way until it's taken out. Okay. So if I keep refreshing this, that was a 49.5. That might change. Let's see if it changes. No, it stayed the same. But again, it's a wave. Okay, so you want the better signal strength, the better off you're going to be. So again, go to the gateways lock table. There's today's date. That's pretty close. So you can see that our battery status is good. I've got one lock in passage mode. There's my firmware. Okay. So speaking of firmware, there are occasions when we update the firmware. Maybe we want this lock to do a different feature or have a different functionality, or whatever the case is. Maybe we just update it, for, just to keep it, fresh and updated. You need to make sure that you check from time to time. There's a couple ways you can check on whether there's an update for of the firmware for your locks. One way to check is to go to our website, alarmlock.com. Okay. I go under resources, and then under the tech support area here, go to the software. That will take you to our software page, our software downloads, and it also has the firmware. Okay, so you can filter by networks, and this will filter down, take all the other stuff out. But you can see that the exit trim, prox and keypad lock with the remote, door position switch, there was an update of the firmware back in January. Okay, and then the ET-PDLN, the exit trim, prox, and keypad lock with no door position switch, the PDL6100, PDL6500, they all were updated back in August of last year. Okay, so go in here, check your locks. If you need to update the firmware, click on download. If you don't have a username and password, just register for access. Okay, first name, last name, fill in everything. Your brands of interest, only check Alarm Lock. If you check anything else, it will delay your access to the site. Create your own username and password. Make sure you check I'm not a robot, and then click register. Give it about 5 minutes, and then you can use your username and password to go in, and you can download that version of firmware. Okay, just click on download and then save it. Okay, now what I do, I'm a neat freak. My wife tells me that all the time. But what I do is I put all of my firmware into a folder that has subfolders. That's just me. But you can see all the different versions of firmware that we've had over the years. Okay. So the PDL6100, that's a very popular lock, prox and keypad cylindrical. And you can see we have several versions of firmware since I came on board 5 years ago. Okay. So once you have that firmware downloaded, go to the website, right click on it, on that profile, and then update lock firmware. And it will ask you to go to that wherever that firmware is, and click open, and it will update. Now, there are occasions, make sure that you read when you look at this, at the description, it will tell you, important, after updating the firmware, you must perform a full download to the lock, your users or features, schedules, date and time, and all that. Then use a valid credential to ensure the access is granted, okay, and you get the beeps and lights, okay? So sometimes it will tell you what we did, okay? Support for holiday schedules, holiday suppression schedules, and so manually unlock the door. So not every lock, unless it has updated firmware, you can use that manually unlock door, okay? So look at all of that, and look at your locks. At the current time, you have to update each lock's firmware one lock at a time. Yeah, I know. That's, yeah. We're working on, I'm working with the engineers to where we can maybe update all of the locks that are of the same lock type with the newest version of firmware. Okay. We're working on that, but right now you have to do it one lock at a time. Okay. Let's see. We talked about wireless, how to program them. One of the things that you might do from time to time, if you don't program the locks very often, you might want to go under wireless actions up here, and you might want to send the date and time update to all the locks. Just do that once every so often, update the status of the locks. But every so often, make sure your date and time is correct. So just send the date and time to all the locks, and all the gateways will just update the date and time for your locks. Okay. That way your schedules work right, everything else works right.